¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Un gusto saludarles. Fíjense que me siento de plácemes, me siento muy honrado porque tengo en mi rancho a la mujer que más sabe en el mundo de mulas y de burros, la doctora Amy McLean. Ella es catedrática de la Universidad de Davis en California.
Sí.
El día de hoy vamos a tratar de preguntarle todo lo que podamos acerca de los burros. Acompáñenme. Amy, hemos coincidido en algunas partes, en algunas conferencias, en otras partes del mundo, y siempre me agrada tus pláticas, tu conocimiento, toda tu experiencia acerca de las mulas. El día de hoy yo te quiero hacer una entrevista para todo el público, sobre todo mexicano, acerca de dudas que tenemos con respecto a la crianza y manejo de mulas.
Thank you, David, for having me here. It's such an honor. Such a very special place to be here and to see your work with the mules, because you're one of the few people that truly understands the behavior of mules and donkeys. And there's not many people in the world that understand that. So it's really special, and I'm very honored to be here. My experience with mules and donkeys came when I was a little baby. And my dad introduced me to a donkey when I was about a year old and told my mom, they were both from the city, my dad from Atlanta and my mom from Manhattan, New York, they were gonna get a mule and donkey farm. And so they did in Georgia, and I've grown up with long ears, so mules and donkeys, and I just love them and have been around them all my life. And in 1988, we had our first mule that was born. That was the first one we produced. And it was very sick. It had a form of pneumonia called Klebsiella pneumonia. And our veterinarian at that time said, you know, if this was a horse, it would be dead. I don't understand why it's still alive and living. And I thought to myself, if this veterinarian, you know, a doctor of animals, does not know the questions to why this mule is so sick, I want to answer these questions one day. So that's where my passion began. And like I said, I grew up with mules and donkeys. So I've always ridden, I've always been around them. I've seen the difference in training. I've seen the difference in how they respond to disease, medication. And I've been fortunate to make a career of trying to study them and understand why they're so amazing and different.
Pues como pueden ver, lo que nos une es la pasión. Solo una persona que es de tal manera apasionada puede dedicar su vida a este tema. Afortunadamente, desde hace unos años para acá, el gusto por los burros o las mulas se ha vuelto una tendencia a nivel global. Y eso pues nos ha favorecido a quienes somos amantes de las mulas. Cuando yo tengo una pregunta, cuando tengo alguna inquietud, siempre recurro a Amy. Ella siempre, si no sabe, tiene el recurso para poder decirnos qué hacer con respecto a los burros y mulas. Amy, ¿cuál es tu especialidad? Dentro de tu pasión por las mulas, burros y mulas, ¿cuál consideras que es tu especialidad?
So I've studied donkeys and mules all of my life and trying to figure out why there's a difference in their behavior, their nutrition, and even the way they respond to disease, going back to 1988 when we had the foal that was so sick. So in 2006, I started a PhD program, so a doctorate program, to study donkeys in West Africa and to look at why donkeys could survive and work in such harsh conditions where horses and hardly humans can live. And from that, it's just expanded to traveling to over 30 countries and looking at all of their physiology from literally the head to the tail in how things work, the differences in their blood, the differences in their temperature, pain, medication. So it's opened into lots of avenues. But again, it's an animal that's been around for thousands of years. And the donkey was domesticated probably 500 to 1,000 years before the horse. And some of the most basic questions we don't know. And then with the mule, we really don't know. It was 2016 when I did the first study that looked at the body temperature of a mule and a henny. So they've been around for thousands of years, and we don't know the most basic information that can help save their lives. So a veterinarian can't even properly treat them. And they've served mankind, they've connected communities of people. There's just so many basic questions we don't know, we don't have answers for. So that's driven my passion, is to have a better understanding for these animals that have helped people for thousands of years.
Amy, yo sé que tú has viajado por todo el mundo y me gustaría saber cuál es tu opinión, cómo ves la crianza, el manejo de burros y mulas en México.
Oh, that's a fantastic question about mules and donkeys in Mexico. And just thinking about the ties of Mexico to Spain, where donkeys especially are so valued and prized. I am excited to see your work with the Association of the Azteca Donkeys and trying to show mules and donkeys not only in the important role of a working animal or a beast of burden, where they're a lifeline to so many impoverished people, but there's also a value in donkeys and mules as a performance animal, like a very expensive horse. And they're incredible equine, and I think it's really important for part of the culture here in Mexico to recognize the importance of the donkey and the mule to your culture and celebrate that, and celebrate it in a sense of it's not only an animal that can carry water or carry, markets to the good or help in a plowing or agriculture sense, but it's also an animal that can be showcased in a performance and show arena. So I think the work you're doing is very important. And I also think the importance of trying to promote breeding of mules and donkeys in the different states throughout Mexico with the support of the government and the military as an important work animal. We just need to add the value to both animals, and not only the mule, but don't forget the donkey, because that's half of the mule.
¿Tú piensas que el burro está en extinción?
Oh, that's a great question. There's definitely a pressure and a threat for the number of donkeys throughout the world. When you look at the world equine population, and that's another thing that's really always, it's challenging to me that some people think that only equine are horses, but equine are horses, donkeys, mules, ponies, zebras, hennies. So all of those animals are equine. But when you look at the pressure that's occurring, especially in China, for the skin of the donkey, the meat of the donkey, it's having a huge impact on donkeys in places where they are used as a very important beast of burden. And people are now becoming the donkey. That is a huge threat to the extinction of the donkey. And that's why it's so important to recognize the breeds of donkeys. There's over 200 breeds of donkeys. And people recognize there's horse breeds, but they don't understand there's actually breeds of donkeys and as many donkey breeds as horses. So we really need to look at protecting their genetics. We need to save semen from the jacks. We need to save eggs and ovums from the jenny. Otherwise, we're going to lose this genetic diversity around the world. And this was the animal, the donkey was the animal that connected people, that connected civilization, and that moved them out of Mesopotamia. It wasn't the horse. That was 500 years later. It was the donkey. So to think that we may one day have no donkeys because of consuming them at a greater use than producing them is really scary. So I am concerned about that because people who have very little resources, if they can easily assume a large quantity of money to sell their donkey, that's a very appealing option versus thinking about long-term of having a savings fund of I have a second donkey, I have a third donkey.
¿Tú piensas, Amy, que los chinos van a acabar con los burros en el mundo?
That's a good question. I've worked in China. I've worked with the government and the private industry. And there's a big effort, we understand, to save the genetics of breeds of Chinese donkeys. But sadly, we're not seeing that effort around the world in other places. There's an effort in Europe through the World Donkey Breeds Program. I'm a part of that. And the European Union and the Food and Agriculture Organization is interested in preserving breeds of donkeys in Europe. But we don't see that in Africa. It's my understanding we're not seeing that in South America, Central America, North America. So, you know, there's the rest of the world that's not participating in my experience of saving these genetics. And those are the populations that are at most risk. Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Ecuador, Guatemala, even the United States. We have lots of feral or wild donkeys, and those are being exported to other places. So we really, in my opinion, need to pay attention to trying to preserve the donkey so we have the donkey for years to come.
En la actualidad, mucha gente está creando burros y mulas, ya no para trabajar, sino nada más como una actividad de paseo, de recreo. ¿Y es a nivel global o solamente en América o también en Europa?
It's a very, I think, interesting time for mules and donkeys.
What is the reason? ¿Cuál es la razón de que de un día para otro las mulas cambiaron de ser un elemento de trabajo ahora a ser a un elemento de placer?
So, especially in the United States, and I've also seen this trend in Europe, people are really enjoying mules as a recreational animal. And today on the ride with you, which was amazing, you had people that had never ridden a mule before, and they were so aware of the fact they picked their own route and the movement was different. They were so careful. And so it's people like that that are being introduced to the unique qualities of mules that's helping grow this interest in using a mule as a trail animal, as a recreational mount. And I think the more people that have that positive experience, the bigger you're gonna see recreation grow. From the competition side, in the US, for example, we've seen an influx of increasing and then a little bit of a decrease because so many people are enjoying them on trail rides and for recreational, as we did today. So I really think there's a strong future in mules, especially on trail riding and recreation, but also the donkey is finding a really important role for older people who have never had a horse, they've never had a mule, and they're maybe a little bit scared of a big animal, but they find the confidence in a donkey. So they're finding this new role. With all of that being said, especially again going back to the US, to the States, there's an increased load, there's an increased number of donkeys and mules coming into veterinary clinics. And what that tells us is the donkeys and mules are being more valued, that people care about their care, and just like a horse, they're interested in investing in their health care. In 2024, the American Horse Council released a survey of the number of different breeds of horses in the United States. Donkeys and mules were together, but they were the 5th largest group of equine. And again, to me, that says a lot. That's really powerful. Like, people are interested, they love their behavior, they love their personality, they're recognizing their unique personality and differences and their agility on the trail. And maybe some people want to do competition with them.
¿Tú crees que esto del gusto por los burros y mulas en la actualidad sea solo una moda o es algo que llegó para quedarse?
Yeah, it's a good question. One thing I've failed to mention is the importance of mules, especially in countries where ranching is so important to their economy, like Brazil and Argentina. If you talk to gauchos or you talk to people that work on ranches there, they highly prefer a mule to a horse. And the value of the mules and then also the donkeys there is here and the horses are here. So I think that's important to mention. And those ranches are not going to go away. People are going to continue to eat meat and beef and, they're going to continue that way of life. And I think as our population ages and they want to still have a connection to horses, because horses, donkeys, mules are becoming members of their family, I think the trend will continue to increase. I think maybe we'll see less dependence upon donkeys and mules, maybe in developing areas and for impoverished people. They may rely more on motorbikes, which is probably not good for the environment. But I continue, and I'm being optimistic, I think we'll continue to see an increase in mules and donkeys as recreation, performance, and then also ranching animals, which I've ignored in some of the previous questions.
¿Qué piensas del futuro de los burros y mulas? ¿Qué está sucediendo alrededor del mundo acerca del manejo, de la crianza, de la reproducción de estos animales?
So in terms of reproduction, especially for donkeys, super exciting times. And I say that because, again, another industry that's been growing probably the past 10 years is the donkey dairy industry, especially in Eastern Europe. And it's also made its way here in Central and South America. It's another use of donkeys. It's a sustainable use of donkeys where you can utilize the milk of a donkey for 10 or 15 years. So it provides value to an animal. I think it's fascinating that donkey milk's the closest thing to human's milk, but it's added value sometimes to animals maybe that wouldn't be used to produce a ranch mule or a show mule. And now this donkey has a value in producing another human product. So I think that's extremely promising because of the need for a replacement to human's milk. A lot of infants have an allergy to cow's milk, so it's not a good supplement. So the donkey milk, again, the donkey's amazing. It gives so much to people. And we think of it as this symbol of poverty and stupidity or, an example of a bad joke. But again, they're helping human lives in so many ways. So I think the donkey dairy industry is very promising. And then I think people will also start to recognize the uniqueness of having mules for riding and performance animals. So I'm optimistic that the mule and donkey industry will continue to grow and prosper. Like I said, we have seen a decline in the performance industry in the US, but we've seen an increase in these other areas. And the other place we've seen a big increase, which I think is extremely important for donkeys and mules, is that, and this goes back to the donkey dairy industry and reproduction, there's been an increase in research, understanding the physiological differences in donkey reproduction, which is very different than horse reproduction. Just a quick example. Donkeys cycle, they come in estrus throughout the year. Horses only in the summer months, but donkeys are survivors and they continue all year long. And there's just been so much positive research that's come and been sponsored from the donkey dairy industry. And that information can be used in the performance sense of making mules and donkeys. It can also be used for making more beast of burdens if we need to. And the other thing I'll mention is the increase of caseloads in the United States and also other industrial places has increased the desire for veterinarians wanting to learn about the physiological differences in donkeys and mules. Even the temperature of a donkey is so much lower. It's different than a horse. So I'm optimistic that it's positive, and the increase in wanting this knowledge will just continue and we'll be more efficient in the future.
Pues ha sido un honor tener a la doctora Amy McLean aquí con nosotros y espero que como hasta ahora nos siga contribuyendo con sus conocimientos, sus estudios, su investigación al mundo de los burros y mulas. Muchas gracias, Amy, por haber estado el día de hoy con nosotros. Es un honor, como te lo comenté, haber visitado nuestro lugar.
Gracias.